Each generation tries to make the world a better place for succeeding generations. Social change and social perception take 3 generations to truly bear fruit. The first generation perceives the need and acts to fulfill it. The second generation lives with the effort to make that change, yet because of the dynamics of the relation between the 2 succeeding generations and the need of the second generation to establish their own identity, separate from the previous, they tend to be critical of their parents' generation, critical and rebellious. Sometimes this results in backsliding, but usually, if the parenting was healthy, the second generation refines the goals and perceptions of the previous, while still proceeding toward those goals. The third generation is born into this change. For them, the dreams of their grandparents are the living fabric of their reality. The changes are integrated into their worldview from the very beginning of life, and there is no going back. If that evolved worldview is threatened, that threat may very well lead to a revolt. Over the past 60 years or more, we have been fighting and struggling for freedom of sexual preferences and gender identity. We have sought to free ourselves from the prison of the gender binary. Men of my generation and those previous were not allowed to be feminine, and women of my generation were not allowed to be masculine. We lived in a social order where more than half of humanity was oppressed because of the sexual organs they had at birth. Male privilege ruled the world and still does, though its rule is weakening. Any who sought to escape this binary prison, whether by behavior or intent, were vilified and severely persecuted to the point of death. Those of us who could see this oppression fought against it, whether within our own lives or within society as a whole. We struggled to deal with the restrictive belief systems handed to us by this society, beliefs that were sometimes so much a part of the world we lived in as to be invisible to us, even in our alienation. We sought to understand that our sense of identity and self-expression were not a mental illness, a perversion, or a sin. We sought to free ourselves from the confines of the gender binary and restrictions on love, because we could not express who we were within those strictures. We fought to free women from male privilege, and we fought to free men from male privilege as well. The gender binary ignores that all beings are a combination of the feminine and the masculine, the anima and the animus. Without being able to express both freely, we can never truly be ourselves. Under the tyranny of the gender binary, all men and women are shackled and gagged, unable to even know their full identity, much less express it. The gender binary is unbalanced. And those who live entirely within its artificial boundaries wind up disturbed as a result. The gender binary is instilled in us from early in our lives, as soon as we begin to socialize outside of the family unit, that is, in school. One of the first lessons instilled in children is that boys have a penis and girls have a vagina. This truly begins before school, but it is reinforced within the school setting. When I was in kindergarten, boys and girls had separate bathrooms in our classroom and separate toys. Boys had cars and construction toys. Girls had a playhouse. We were taught to play separately. I remember that I and a friend of mine wanted to play in the playhouse. Fortunately, we had a teacher who listened to our objections and gave us a time when we could play at house. Though many of the girls objected, and the other boys shrugged at us and went on with their boyish pursuits, yet the two of us felt we had achieved something, though we didn't know what it was at the time. And so the binary began to loosen its hold even in my childhood. But it has taken over 60 years to reach the point we are at now. 60 years and several generations. When I was a child, there was no term for transgender. There were cross-dressers and transvestites, but they were considered the worst of the perverts. The idea of completely transforming one's gender was almost unthinkable. I remember as an early adolescent being impacted by stories of what were at that time called hermaphrodites, along with men and women who lived as the opposite of the gender they were assigned at birth. These stories, contained in Ripley's Believe It Not or Amazing Tales, along with stories of other freaks of nature, stirred me to the point that I remember them decades later. I openly identified as a freak in junior high and high school. I waved my freak flag high. For my entire life, I have struggled with my sexual identity and gender. I have lived on the outskirts of society, a social outcast, never at home within the gender binary, yet uncertain whether I was heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, or something beyond those terms. Most of my life, I considered myself bisexual, though I felt that something about this classification was inaccurate and restrictive. When buying used clothes from boutiques that did not clearly separate the clothing into men's and women's, I would find myself often drawn to clothing that was more feminine. I always chose hairstyles outside of the norm. Long hair when that was still unpopular, longer hair when long hair started to become popular, punk styles when longer hair was the norm, and shaven bald in complete rebellion. When I wore a beard, I would wax it so that it looked kind of like dreadlocks. Without realizing it, I was seeking to live outside of the gender binary and outside of the heterosexual definition of sexuality. I was an activist, protesting for the social equality of all perceived races. I was also a peace activist and a proponent of anarchism. Yet beyond all, I was an artist, a poet who found a greater self-expression within my art. In fiction, all of the characters to which I gave life were expressions of myself, regardless of gender identity. In many ways, my personal evolution paralleled the evolution taking place within the fringes of our society, in the LGBT community. I am also a shaman, and my transgender non-binary journey is shamanic. My heart is a brilliant sun full of love. I cannot give this love full expression as either a man or a woman. Only as both does this love shine freely and in full. Only as both and as something more. Right now, I am seeking fuller expression for the woman within me, as my life until now has been expressed by and large as a man. But I am really neither man nor woman, but both and beyond both. As one of my fellow shamans observed, transgender and non-binary people stand at the forefront of human evolution. We are the pioneers, taking humanity beyond the restrictions of the gender binary. One day, perhaps many generations removed, inevitably as all things grow, all of humanity will bask in this freedom. Though they may persecute us even to death, reactionary conservatives cannot prevent this. They can impede it a while, but they cannot stop it. The struggle of the LGBTQIA+ community for recognition and acceptance has itself evolved over the past 60 years. It has exceeded all restrictions imposed upon it, overcoming and outgrowing them in what could be called an organic process. It is as unstoppable as the growth of vines. It has become, and indeed always was, a movement for freedom of expression, freedom of love, freedom of identity. The LGBT movement seeks to free all of humanity from the prison of the gender binary. It is the LGBTQIA+ movement because it seeks the equality of all beings. I would even offer that we should include under that rainbow umbrella the right of all creatures and all plants to exist, while recognizing that community of existence necessitates self-sacrifice undertaken in love and recognition. While many within the rainbow community are atheistic, the movement fosters spiritual well-being. The LGBTQIA+ community engenders such a freedom of self-expression and honest embrace of one's truth that it may as well be termed a spiritual birth. While the religious conservatives threaten to strangle all spirituality by their strict interpretation of dogma, Because I am a grandparent of the Rainbow Tribe, I can but look in wonder upon the upcoming generation of grandchildren. They are the fruit of our long years of struggle, and they are a joy to behold. These children nowadays get it even better than we did, because they live more fully within the world that we have struggled to create. They are the true benefactors of all of our decades of effort. They are to be celebrated, cherished, and protected. Precisely because they bear the fruit of all our blood, sweat, and tears, they are now being targeted by religious conservatives and extremists. Those who are oppressed, those who are opposed to the Rainbow Revolution, rightly perceive the danger in this upcoming generation, though they try to give their efforts the veneer of freeing the youth from our perverse influence. What they do not understand, what they cannot understand, because of the very dogma that they hold as truth, is that this change is as irreversible as progress, because it is progress. Mankind, and I personally believe all life, seeks self-expression. And that self-expression is constantly exceeding the boundaries and definitions of the past. This, more than anything, is what moves us forward. And every step towards freedom and greater self-expression is viewed by those who stand moored within old limitations as a threat and a perversion. They claim it leads to corruption, though in fact that corruption is due to the deficiencies of their own unhealthy limitations. The movement towards freedom is intrinsically a movement towards respecting and honoring others, celebrating that which makes us each unique, and the miraculous light of existence that sparkles at the core of us each. The movement towards freedom is always a recognition of rights and equality. Where some may argue that their freedom means their freedom to harm or abuse others, that is not freedom, but a perversion resulting from self-limitation and ignorance. Empathy is the true measuring stick of human evolution. Empathy, freedom of expression, and tolerance. Tolerance is itself a flawed term, as it implies there is something to tolerate. Instead of tolerating diversity, it should be embraced, celebrated, and encouraged. The children of upcoming generations grow ever more beautiful, ever more dazzling in their freedom to be themselves and their fellowship. They are to be celebrated. We need to learn from their example, and we need to protect them from the current efforts to muzzle them. This is that for which we fought for more than 60 years. We cannot allow them to be crippled and harmed by the cruel efforts of those who seek to send us back into the dark age of oppression. Yet, in looking on these children, I know these cruel efforts will fail. People grow towards freedom as plants grow towards the sun. These children may suffer from the ignorance of others, but it will not stop them. In the end, they and the generations that follow them will overcome it. Step bravely and resolutely, children, yet hold love and respect in every footfall, for each step you take brings hope for the future. And as you learn to walk, know that we are here to protect you.